Book 101 review. Book 101 is about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He is a motivational speaker, no other than Mr. Andrew Laszlo. Welcome, Mr. Andrew, on Book 101 Review. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Well, thank you, Daniel, for having me on your show. After a long career in finance, retired, and my passion in life now is to share my father's story, which I do with a PowerPoint and his memoir. He was, his family was victims of the Holocaust, and he was the only survivor. And he became a very famous cinematographer when he came to the U.S. He was honored with Elie Wiesel at the nation's capital. And his life story is motivating and inspirational. He was one of very few survivors from his town, and he survived with strong will, preparation, and instinct. And now I tell his story to honor him.
And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Mr. Andrew. And hoping for more and more inspirational book like this. And today let's talk about the early days in Hungary. So tell us, what
Well,
is... Yes, go ahead.
oh, okay. Well, he was a great athlete. He was on the junior national team, being groomed for the Olympics in figure skating and fencing. He had no idea what was waiting for him. There was no playbook to how to survive the Holocaust. But as anti-Semitism began to spread in Hungary, he was taken off the junior teams. He was not allowed to march with his school. What hurt the most was when his fencing master and mentor, almost a second father figure, told him he would no longer coach him because he was a Jew. And then there were some signs of changing times. When he saw the Graf Zeppelin fly over Papa, he saw his first swastika. And when he asked about it, his father told him what it was, but wouldn't elaborate. And when they got their first radio, an early program featured a loud, boisterous, upcoming German politician. It was his first exposure to Adolf Hitler.
Interesting, Mr. Andrew. And what is the original draw? What brought you, or what your father brought in Hungary in the first place?
Could you repeat, please, Daniel?
What was the original draw? What
The,
brought your fathers in Hungary in the first place? And what were your father's first vivid impression upon arriving in Hungary?
when arriving in America, you mean when he came to America after the war?
Yes, please.
Okay, well, on the when he walked on, he got was granted emigration to the United States at the displaced persons camp in Ulm, Germany. When he walked on the SS Ernie Pyle in Bremenhaven Harbor, his first thought was he swore that his past was sealed and he would never talk about it again. And that's a promise he kept for 50 years. But then his first experience with America were the waffles and eggs they served on board. They were smothered in butter and maple syrup. He had never tasted anything so good. And America became the land of his dreams. He never forgot that hundreds of thousands of Americans risked and gave their life to save his when it wasn't their homeland that was threatened. We have a picture of him arriving on the boat in New York Harbor. And when he did, I think his mind started to transition from the horrors of his past to what he described as a great adventure that lay ahead of him.
And Mr. Andrew, what does the memory of your father's days in Hungary sound like?
Well, he had a really good youth. I mean, he was an athlete. He came from a good family. They were middle class, so they were able to do a lot of things. They lived in a beautiful house. And then it all changed in March of 1944 when the Germans invaded, and they were evicted from their house and taken to live in the ghetto in Papa, surrounded by a wall, where they shared a one-bedroom apartment with several other families. When I went back to Hungary with my father, he actually took us to the apartment and showed us many of the places he had been during the Holocaust.
If you had to capture the essence of his early days as a single mental image or a snapshot, what would it be, Mr. Andrew?
Very optimistic, very happy, and also very talented. He learned to do things with in many trades, metal, woodworking, etc., and developed all kinds of skills with his hands that helped him survive later in his story.
Let's talk about the navigating challenge and building foundation. How did he navigate the significant language gap? Can you share
Oh,
the funny?
that was
Yes.
very interesting. I'm glad you asked, Daniel. When he walked off the boat in New York City, he had $2 in his pocket, enough to buy a loaf of bread. He had no trade and no advanced education. Of course, you couldn't get that during the war, and he didn't speak English. But again, he was a survivor and he figured out how to do things. He learned English by sitting in a continuous feature movie theater and watched the movie Gunga Din over and over again for days at a time. And after a month, he spoke English without an accent. It was his fourth language after Hungarian, German, and Russian.
So, Mr. Andrew, what was the first real breakthrough in feeling a sense of belonging of your father?
Of feeling a sense of belonging to America.
Yes.
Well, he was very lucky in that he was drafted into the U.S. Army and assigned to the Signal Corps, where he developed kind of family, and more importantly, he learned the art of motion picture photography, which he loved. And then he felt he had a career. It was very hard to get a job, though, in that industry. And one day he showed up on a Friday on the set of the Phil Silvers Sergeant Bilko show, and there was a new piece of camera equipment that no one could run. And they asked him if he could run it. He said he was the best there was. So you asked about a break. He had never seen the equipment before, but he told him that he was the best there was. They told him to show up Monday. He hid in the studio over the weekend and practiced with it and took it apart and put it together. And by the end of the weekend, come Monday morning, he was the best. His career in motion pictures had started, and he had a tremendous career. He became a famous cinematographer. He did movies like Shogun, Rambo, First Blood, The Warriors, um, over 100 movies and TV series.
What was the most significant practical challenges that he faced in those early days, Mr. Andrew?
Um, it was just very hard to get jobs. And so he had to figure out ways to get his resume in front of producers. And he had all kinds of clever, I mean, the same instincts that helped him survive. He put his resume on shirt cardboards so no one could tear it up, when he gave it to them. He worked very hard. He had a very interesting experience with Ed Sullivan, who hired him to film a political event in the Dominican Republic. And then when he was on the plane, told him that he was actually going to Havana to film the first interview, top secret, with Fidel Castro. None of the equipment he had brought with him worked. So we filmed a 10-minute interview that was shown on national TV by putting his finger in the reel and advancing the film by hand.
Mr. Andrew, every society has its unspoken codes. What is the crucial unwritten rule of Hungarian life that your father learned the hard way?
Um, I think he learned how to survive the hard way. Very few people thought of the things that he did. And to give you an example, to answer your question, when he was sent to the ghetto, they were only allowed one suitcase to bring with them. And yet he made trips back to his old home in the middle of the night. And with the possessions he couldn't bring, he buried them in caches. And each cache had food, medicine, tools, warm clothing, and some money. And those caches helped him survive later in the story. When he was assigned to the labor camp, when the Germans took him to the labor camp, they did put the young and the strong to work. Very few people ever survived the camp, but he built a knapsack that he waterproofed, that he had hidden pockets in the straps, that he kept all kinds of survival gear in it. So when there was a moment of chaos, when their camp was bombed, he had it packed and ready to go and was able to escape. The people who weren't prepared stayed and worked until they were too weak to work, and then they were murdered. He even had leather sewed into the back of the knapsack, which later in the story, when he was at the concentration camps, he used to sew thick soles on his shoes so his feet wouldn't freeze.
Interesting, Mr. Andrew. And beyond the stereotypes, how would your father describe the core character or spirit of the Hungarian people he encountered during that time?
So this answer might surprise you. The Hungarian people didn't stand up for their war heroes. Again, his father was a war hero and not even a practicing Jew, but because he had one drop of Jewish blood going back 4 generations, the Hungarians turned on him and cooperated with the Nazis. After the war, when he returned home from the ghetto of Theresienstadt, none of his former friends even wanted anything to do with him. The same people who waved the swastika less than a year ago and killed Jews were now pretending to be Russians, but still wouldn't stand up for their own countrymen. Later in life, when Hungary offered him a Lifetime Achievement Award for his career in the movie business, he accepted the award at the Alba Regai Film Festival, and it was their equivalent to our Oscars. It was on national TV, and he, instead of thanking everyone in the room, reminded Hungary of what they had done to their own people and admonished them to never let it happen again. The room was silent when he walked off the stage, and he said, "I don't think I'll ever be invited back." And he never was.
Mr. Andrew, what is the quality or skill that he developed during those early days? Is it patience, resilience, or a new way of thinking?
Resilience. But one of the very interesting things that maybe isn't exactly what you're asking, when he was a young boy, he was always afraid of being alone. But one day he was with an aunt who left him for a little bit. And when he came back, he was crying. And she told him something that he remembered for the rest of his life and helped him survive. She told him that if you listen to the quiet, you will never be alone if you learn to listen to the quiet. And he said many times when he was at the concentration camp and felt alone and repressed, he could listen to it, and that kept him going. Another thing, his father, when he was taken away to the labor camp, which by the way was the last time he saw his mother, gave him the advice that he should shave every day. And that's something that he never quite understood. But in the labor camp and the concentration camps, he did shave every day. And one day after shaving, when he was down to 90 pounds, he was a big man, he had an epiphany and he felt clean and strong, and all of a sudden knew that no one could break his spirit and he was going to survive. And then he understood his father's advice. So I think that's advice from his father were things that helped define him and gave him strength.
Hungary was profound and complex history. How palpable was the weight of history in the everyday life and conversation of people you met, Mr. Andrew?
Well, so when we went back to Hungary with my father to visit the places he had been to in the Holocaust, we met some of the people that knew him. This was 50 years afterwards. And the Hungarian people were so oppressed, having lived under Russian rule, that whereas my father had a career that flourished in America, the people who stayed did menial jobs in small uh, concrete bunker apartments and really didn't develop. They had horrible lives. They were kind of overlooked by history. But there were some really wonderful stories. And I often say that sometimes beautiful stories are born in terrible times. When my father was in Theresienstadt starving, he made some forays with a gang into the countryside, and they broke into a house looking for food and found a piano. And it so happened that Fraser Jury, a famous pianist from before the war, was with them. They urged him to play, and even though he was reluctant, when he played the song that he played was "Smoke Gets in Your Eyes." And my father wrote that the sounds filled the air with beauty and humanity and an indescribable joy of being alive. Years later in New York, my father was filming an event at Rockefeller Center, and he heard a piano that sounded familiar. When he approached the piano, there sat Fraser Gurry. They recognized, and he played "Smoke Gets in Your Eyes" again. And Gurry told him that he didn't know if he would have ever played the piano again without the encouragement that day from his friends in Theresienstadt.
Mr. Andrew, if the experience was business related, what was the energy of the post communist, post business world like?
Um, his experience in business or mine?
Your father.
Well, again, he became a famous cinematographer. He worked with many stars, I mean, and many famous directors like Steven Spielberg, uh, William Friedkin, Francis Ford Coppola, and did some very, very famous movies, and was nominated for 2 Emmy Awards, one for Shogun, where he saved a man's life during the filming, and one for a TV movie called Man Without a Country. And his artistry was so excellent that in an industry where people get fired all the time, he was never fired once. His many of the techniques that he developed are still used by cinematographers today.
Interesting, Mr. Andrew. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, my other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 1-1 review in fifth season too, comedy 1-1 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well, geography 1-1 in fourth season, and my baby podcast, law 101 and mental health 101. Love Letters in third season, and Movie 101 Review, Music 101 in fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Andrew, if you could go back and give one piece of advice to your father itself, what would it be?
So the moral of the story is that everybody at some point in their life is experiences poverty, abuse, neglect, or or other terrible things. But at some point, you have to move on and define your own life, because if you use your past as an excuse, you're giving up on your future. And Daniel, I want to thank you very much for having me on your show and wish you the best luck with your podcasts, and invite anyone interested in my father's life to buy his memoir, Footnote to History, on Amazon.
Yes, indeed. A footnote, people, footnote to history. And please do support Mr. Andrew's father for sure. It will empower our memories and legacy to the world. And again, Mr. Andrew, thank you so much for your time. And again, can you please invite our listeners to support your father's book?
Thank you so much, Daniel. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So where do people can buy the book, Mr. Andrew?
They can buy it on Amazon, Footnote to History.
Footnote to history. Yes, people, and Mr. Andrew, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate it.
More to come, people. See you soon.